Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 8:30 on Tuesday, July 26th, and this is Conscious Conversations. Today we're talking about fear or faith. And as you can imagine, this is a topic that can be very, very broad, but obviously one that can also be very, very relevant to where we are today. So if you would, grab coffee, grab water, do what you need to do. I am going to make sure that we are posted on the proper channels, and we're going to get started in just a few moments. If you would, say hello. Go ahead and put it in the comment sections. That's way I know who is with me. And we can also open up the discussion around your definition. So I'd love to know what your definition of faith means. Of course, don't worry. As always, try to be instructional and informative in some way or another. So we'll be giving you the Oxford Dictionary's version of the word. But I'm curious about your own personal definition of what faith means. Wonderful. We got people joining us. So understanding just in general the idea of fear versus faith. There's quite a bit of conversation about recession. There's many people who are looking to call things early so that they can be the expert. And whether there is a formal recession or not, although I'm pretty sure all facts are leaning towards a recession, what that means for you and your home can have a very different reality than what is happening, say, to the stock market or to certain industries and or businesses specifically. So understanding the way that fear shows up and how that has an effect on our body. Many people suffer from anxiety, they suffer from depression, they suffer from just the fear of the unknown. I know that I am someone who has had to battle that quite a bit, coming from a scarcity mindset, coming from a background where things were not necessarily always stable, or financial security wasn't always there, has some deep-rooted aspects in my own personal programming, and I'm sure that it does for many other people. But one of the most important elements that I think is interesting about the fear that many people have when it comes to the future is really about only 8% of the things that people worry about are actually something that they have either control over or that they can make an influence on what is happening. More often than not, fear in and of itself is that wonderful mnemonic device that is the acronym of false evidence appearing real, right? So whenever we have fear, and I think I might have shared this, I know for many of you, if you've been around for a while, you know that there are irrational fears. Many people have them, I have them, and one of those irrational fears was always a fear of being homeless, somehow losing it all and being left on the street. Now, this is false evidence appearing real because there is no evidence to support that that is what's going to happen to me. If I go and I look at a track record of what happens in situations whenever there might be a pinch or whenever there might be a failure, I have a track record of continuing to push through. Doug and I have a track record of making things happen whenever they are necessary. In addition to that, more importantly, I am surrounded by wonderful human beings that I know would never allow that to happen. As long as my pride wouldn't get in the way, I know that that wouldn't happen. And so in those instances where there is an irrational fear, and it's called irrational for a reason, right? There is no rationale to it, is that it is false evidence appearing real. So when you hear negative words, you see news articles, you see headlines that are completely based on fear-mongering, right? And I had to do some research before this morning. One of those things of researching that was understanding that in the English dictionary, right, there are 2,860 negative words comparatively to the 1,709 positive words. It's just natural in the English language that we use far more words to describe the levels of pain, the levels of suffering, the levels of fear, and the levels of negativity than we do to explain how we feel, right? What happens? I go, how are you doing today? And usually I get two responses. If I'm talking to Brad Bonert, I get a living the dream. And if it's everybody else, it's I'm good. right? That's the word that we use as a descriptor for how we're feeling in a positive or not negative, right? An indifference kind of mood. And so understanding fear versus faith is when you are challenged, whether it is an actual challenge or it is a irrational challenge, right? Something is happening over there. The building 2 houses down from my house is burning, and so therefore I must start throwing water on my house. Well, sure, that might be a preventative, but just because something is happening to someone else doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening to you. And so that is where often many people want to compare themselves, their situation, their progress to someone else. And so understanding a true understanding of what faith looks like for you is what this conversation is truly about. Now, that could be faith in God, that could be faith in the universe, that could be faith in someone or something else. It could be faith in yourself. And, on a deeper level, having faith in yourself and having faith in something higher than you are very much synonymous with one another. Yet, as promised, right, the Oxford Dictionary's definition of faith is to have absolute confidence in someone or something, right? So absolute confidence of someone or something, so that would be the idea of even in the absence of evidence or even in the absence of certain things that are going to show you that you are to be confident in that person or that thing, you still are. Right? And so having faith in yourself specifically is something that when we talk about confidence, I believe that confidence is 100% directly correlated to preparedness. Right? And so this is the idea of what are you doing to ensure that you are setting yourself up for success. One of the things that has happened in quite a few conversations, it's happened around business, it's happened around personal relationships. Good morning, Nicole. Good morning, Isaiah. Good morning, Doug. Part of those conversations have been around life happening to them. A lot of stuff is happening to them. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about this process is, and this process meaning the human experience, is an understanding of what is happening to you versus what is happening for you. And now, of course, that is a mindset. There's an idea that is that the one thing that makes mankind unique is our mind. Everything else anatomically you could find in a pig or a horse. And so really understanding that the soul element and the mind element of what is the human being, and I know that we talked about this during the first conscious conversation, but here it is repeated to you, is the understanding that one of the things that makes us one of the most intelligent species on this planet is the fact that our brain has 2 abilities that most animals do not have. One of those is going to be our ability to recall with emotion, right? And so that's to have past experiences, memories, and have a recall of what that has meant to us emotionally, what that's meant to us physically, both negative and positive, right? And the other thing that is one of the most magical aspects of what we have in terms of being an intellectual species is our ability to imagine, to see something, visualize something that is not conceptually there, and then bring it to fruition. And we see this in science, and we see this in architecture, and we see this in inventions, and all these things that happen in our world of individuals who have identified something visually in their brain, and then they have worked actively towards that. Again, having the confidence and the faith that that thing that they have visualized, if they work at it, they continue to push through, they move through adversity and challenges, that ultimately they are going to get to that end result. And so this is an understanding around what practice means, right? So when we talk about practice as doctors, or we talk about practice as lawyers, right? This is the idea of practice in the sense of really applying the skills or the beliefs or the tools that are being used, right? So when we talk about in our house, Doug and I talk about this quite often, where we talk about that in that idea that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, is that life is your practice. So, for those of you that do yoga, and more so than just asana yoga, but truly understanding yoga from that idea of it being 100% about your practice and the yoke of you and your creator. That is the idea of your life is your practice of yoga. For those of you that are faith-based, it's an understanding that being a practicing Catholic or practicing your Muslim faith or anything is an understanding that the beliefs, the ideas are things that you are then applying to your daily life. And so this is those opportunities to where whenever there's an opportunity of challenge, whenever there is an opportunity really of any kind, it's that understanding that faith, going back to that word, is having absolute confidence in either something or someone. And so this is one of the things that I think is very important, that when life is happening for you and it is causing challenges in your world, that is the opportunity for you to apply the compassion. It's the opportunity for you to apply the gratitude. It's the opportunity for you to apply the patience. It's the opportunity for so many of those things that we read about or that we talk about, being able to actually put into practice, into our daily activities, is really that idea of reiterating our confidence in those beliefs and ideas. And so understanding this is one of the things that I think is very important about understanding the law of laws, right? This is the natural law of cause and effect, Newton's law, that is understanding that everything is going to have an effect. So even just think about yourself. I see that it was Kelly Colasardo's birthday yesterday. Happy belated birthday, Kelly. It's Julia Humphrey's birthday today. I think it's so fascinating from that idea of where we are and all of the things that had to happen in order for you to be here on your birthday, right? Your parents had to meet. Their parents had to meet. All of the little activities and micro decisions that had to happen in this universe for you to be conceptualized and then for you to be birthed, right? So it's an understanding of truly this idea of the cause and effect. And so although Newton has talked about cause and effect, we have seen cause and effect in the Hindu religion. We've seen it in the Veda texts of yogic texts from thousands of years ago, talking about the idea of karma, right? Karma, in essence, is cause and effect, right? You do good deeds, you will have good deeds. If you do bad deeds, you will have bad deeds done to you. This is also what we've heard biblically in the what you sow, so shall you reap, right? And so this is the idea that God or life is not happening to you, life is happening for you, is also the understanding that what you are doing, the ideas that you're manifesting, the seeds that you are planting, are going to be the things that you harvest in the future. So my work ethic today is going to affect my results next quarter. The way that I show up in my relationship with my partner today is going to show up in our bond in the future. The way that I am building relationships with my friends are going to show up in the way that my friends show up in the future. And so this truly is one of those activities that having faith in yourself, having the absolute confidence in yourself, is going to be in that level of preparedness. It's going to be in the activities that you're doing. It's going to be in the seeds that you're planting. And so really understanding at a fundamental level that faith will outweigh fear when you move into action. So it's not just God has a plan. I love this. Kashmir Parker, I remember being in a class that I was teaching, and one of the things that she had talked about was, pray as if it's all up to God, work as if it's all up to you. And I loved that, because whether you have faith in something larger than yourself or you have faith in yourself, understanding that you must work with the level of confidence that is directly correlated to it being up to you. And you've heard many people talk about this. When I work, I get luckier. When I'm more intentional in my relationships and my conversations, somehow the universe comes back to me. And it is 100% in this idea of cause and effect. The things that I am planting, right, the things that I am sowing are also the things that I'm going to be reaping. And so truly understanding this from a fundamental level, is to really take a deep dive and look at some of the things that are there for you. So before we go even further on this topic, I want to hear from you. What are some of those challenges that you're having, or how has faith shown up for you? Or in this conversation around confidence, what are you doing in your daily activities to become more prepared, to become more confident, to be intentional in some of those things that are in your life to make sure that you are leaning into your faith versus resting in your fear? So you're going to go ahead and do that. Get those fingers typing. Would love to hear from you. I'd love to take a sip of coffee, and then we're going to keep going with this. Isaiah had put down here, how will you shift with the market to still do high production? Will you have to shift your niche? The reason I ask is there's always going to be top producers. What will you do to be the one of them if a down market were to come? And that's a great question. Isaiah, Warren Buffett has a saying, which is, you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. And I love that, because I think that when we're talking about a recession, or we're talking about what's happening in the market, or any kind of shift, that's the tide, right? The tide's rising, tide's lowering. Many agents, if you're in real estate, and Isaiah, you're in real estate, many people in the last 2 years have benefited from the tide rising, right? So the number of units that they have done have gone down. They've rested on their laurels because the home prices have gone up. And so when you are commission-based, the higher the price, the higher the paycheck. And so sure, I did less units, but I made more money, has been, for many people, an okay justification. But what happens when the tide goes out? All of a sudden, they're naked, right? Because they have no savings, they have no infrastructure, they have no systems, they have no leverage in their world. They've not been building solid relationships. Their relationships have been based on transactions versus a relationship-based business. And so now that the transactions are shifting, or they're drying up, they're finding themselves standing in the middle of the water naked, going, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Can someone throw me a towel? And so the top producers in whatever industry that they're in always come from, and I think it's very, I hope that all of you have the idea of mentally being in second place or third place. I hope that you always carry with you that underdog mentality that it is ours to take, and then when we have it, it is ours to give up. And so what are you doing to protect it? And not ever resting on your laurels for being the top person in your market, or, we're doing great. That's it. I don't need to do anything to change. I don't have to do anything to get better. I don't have to do anything to learn, right? When you talk about people who are not just looking for attention, but are looking for long-term projection for their business, these are the people who are invested. Again, their confidence is directly correlated, and not 15 seconds of fame, not in how many followers that they have, but having confidence in the content that I'm creating is providing value. I'm building a solid community. I am leaning into my friendships and my partnerships, right? That is where that person stays at the top. Now, your niche might move, right? If I had sold toasters 50 years ago, then, the idea that everybody wanted toasters, or if I had a taxi driving business and I was competing against Uber, that would be some of those questions that I would ask myself about having to transition with the market. But in terms of your niche specifically within the real estate need, right, that is first identifying what your niche is, and then having a really solid understanding about what is happening in your niche, right? What is the problem that I solve? How am I the solution for people in their world? And then leaning into that story to make sure that people are truly understanding the value that you bring to them every single day. That is how you withstand any kind of market, right? Let's see. So Angela had said that, consistent prioritizing of my faith, prayer, and social work. And this is what's very interesting. If you go to church on Saturday, and then, you are a heathen Sunday through Saturday, well, then that's not actually practicing your faith. That's, punching in a clock. And so one of the things, Angela, when you're talking about being consistent with your faith, is how do I bring that into this next appointment? How do I bring this into my conversation and the way that I show up for my vendors? How do I bring my faith into and my practice into the way that I respond to the person on customer service, or I respond to the person who cut me off in traffic, right? That is the idea of it being something intertwined with the way that you function through life, right? I remember having this conversation with a very good friend of mine, Jen. We were talking about individuals quite frankly, in a faith space, spiritual space, that it was, when they were on stage, they were all kumbaya and peace and love, but behind stage, they were some of the rudest people to the staff that were there at the center. And that would be an example of where your activities are not in alignment with what you say, right? That whole idea of you have to walk the walk and talk the talk is truly that idea of bringing and practicing these things that are important to you, as we were talking about last week, of self-image, both higher self and lower self, right? In our self-image, and bringing that into our day-to-day activities. And so looking at not when can I time block time to be faithful, but rather where can I bring my faith into everything else that's in my day, right? Let's see. So Isaiah said, I lost out on 4 listing appointments in a row and nailed the last 2. I know this is where I'm meant to be. It's having the faith that it is the losses that are a part of the process. Absolutely. In real estate, I remember when I first started, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, where when I had first started, this was in the midst of the recession. There were still people that were in short sale, they were in foreclosures. There was a lot of things going on in terms of people who were still upside down, wildly upside down on their homes. So the language that we were having looked very different than maybe you have had in the last year or so. And I remember having the conversation that was, okay, if I want to do 100 closings in that year, and I needed to have 50 conversations it was a correlation of 50 conversations to 1 closing, right? Well, then that would mean that I would have to have 5,000 conversations, right? 5,000 conversations to have 100 closings. Now, what that also meant is, let's say that there was, out of 100 closings, there's a 25% fallout rate, meaning you take the listing, but they either take the home off, they choose to get a divorce, they rent it, something happens, they stay, whatever it might be, right? So then that means that in order for me to have 100 closings, I would actually need to take 125 listings. Okay, well, taking 125 listings out of 5,000 conversations, right, means that I need 4,875 no's, not right now's, FU's, hang up, disconnect, I'm calling, I'm on the do not call list, whatever it might have been. That's 4,875 no's to get 125 yeses, to get 100 closings, to fund whatever it was that I wanted to do. That is fundamentally one of the things about sales or business, is that rejection, and this is very hard for many of you that are solopreneurs, or in which your business is directly correlated to who you are, right? So I am the Michael Reedy brand. And so how do I separate that when you're saying no to Michael Reedy coaching or our leverage companies or anything else, that you aren't saying no to who I am as a person, you are saying no to what are the things that I offer at this moment in time, right? And so that is something that's very hard to get over if you have a direct correlation, number one, to your validation being external. So I need external validation in order to feel good with myself. Well, 4,875 no's doesn't necessarily feel good. But if I go, they're not saying no to me. Most of them don't even know me. Most of them didn't know me 30 seconds before this phone call. Then there's a way of separating that idea that they're saying no to my products or services, or no to this point in time, than they are saying it to me, right? I think another funny example of this is when it happens, in a household. Maybe you have a grandmother who makes you a plate of food, and then they bring it to you, and you say, "Oh no, I'm not hungry." and that feels like you're rejecting their love, and you're like, no, actually, I'm just not hungry, right? And this is where, so fundamentally, when we do an act of service, or we think that we're doing something nice or positive, or we're making an effect, if we get a no, somehow that is a rejection towards us, not nearly taking into consideration what was happening on the other side of the conversation, right? Everybody wants to look good and be right, and everybody wants to feel needed. And so there's an element of where, when you get rejected, or when your services get rejected, where you don't feel like you look good, and you don't feel like you are right, and you don't feel like you are heard. And so fundamentally, we have to understand, where are we going back to the well to make sure, again, from that faith, am I putting my confidence in myself, or am I putting my confidence in the decision maker, or the decisions of others, right? So understanding these things, and hearing, I would love to know, for those of you that are on here, what are you hearing? What are you taking away from this conversation? Isaiah and Angela, I love you participating. Please continue to participate. For those of you that are also on here, I'd love to hear from you. What are some of these kind of takeaways? One of the last things that I want to say on this, when we're talking about, some of these things that are here, is I truly believe that the greatest form of leverage have been ships, right? We have used ships on water to connect this world and make an international, cohesive collaboration, right? We've broken down walls, we've removed borders, we've got a lot of work left to do, but we've done that because of ships. Spaceships, we've used spaceships in order to discover new planets and to discover new things about our own world. Science and understanding gravity. We've used space to put satellites, again, to connect us, so that I am right here in front of you live, because we are beaming a thread of data up into space and then back down to you within milliseconds. But I truly believe that the best forms of ships are actually in the idea of friendship and partnership and relationship and leadership and stewardship. And so understanding fundamentally, what am I doing? What are those ships that I'm steering? What are the seeds that I am sowing? What are the causes that I am looking for an effect? When you become the center of realizing that no thing is going to affect you mentally or emotionally, or your success, whatever you define as success, fundamentally you are everything that was created, right? Like we talked about last week, you are everything that is out in the universe is inside of you. You have to be the one to take an understanding about, what are the seeds that I'm planting? What are the ships that I am sailing, right? What is the cause that I'm looking for an effect? And then I have to go, if my relationship with my partner is not what I want, what am I doing and how am I showing up? If I'm not getting all of the listings, or if I'm having conversations with the wrong people, I have to go back and understand, why am I having conversations with the wrong people? Or what are my skill sets? What am I doing to better my skill sets? Or am I resting on my laurels, right? Taking a true fundamental ownership. And when you have that ownership and you're putting it into your preparedness, then your confidence is going to go up, and so is your faith, right? Let's hear some ahas. So Doug has said he loves this topic. Awareness is key. Absolutely. This is one of those things that truly, if you remove the blinders, right, or awaken to some of this conversation, it only causes you to have to sit with yourself a little bit more. And then no matter what, this is not the part of self-deprecation, right? We don't shame ourselves of anything before. We go, now that I am aware, now that the blinders have been taken off, what seeds am I planting today? What ship am I jumping off of and getting on today, right? Those are the things that are fundamentally one of those big aspects that we can be intentional about, right? Nicole Walker said, I am realizing that I am not alone with how I feel sometimes as an agent in the real estate industry. It's normal to feel that I need a breakthrough because we all feel it over time. I need to get out of my head and have the awareness to know what is real and what is fear, that acronym of false evidence appearing real, and use a tactic to pivot that mindset and keep me on track for the goal. I love that, Nicole. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. See, Angela has said, realizing that I steer my level of faith by practice and awareness so that I can overcome those fears that creep in all aspects. Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, everybody, it is the top of the hour. I want to thank you so much for being with me. If you find value in this, please share it. We would love to build our audience, of course. These conversations came first out of necessity, and truly I have loved that we're able to build a community together. We're able to start our days this way, right? I have to start my day in terms of preparation on what we're going to talk about, and hopefully it speaks to you in some way with what's going on in your world. Again, I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon, a wonderful week, and truly sit, and meditate on what are the seeds that I'm planting, what are the ships that I'm sailing, and what is the causes that I am putting into the universe or into my world that is giving me the effects or the results that are happening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.